thank you everyone for joining. Handing it over to Emilio Lopez, our steering committee chair at the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit. Welcome to the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit Town Hall.
Thank you, Albert, and thank you everybody for joining us. This is, as Albert mentioned, the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit Town Hall. So everybody knows this meeting is being audio and video recorded. Before getting started, I want to give a huge thanks to our sponsors. You might not see everybody behind the scenes today, but there's a lot of people here that have helped to make this happen. And so many, many thanks to everybody. We're also, again, recording and we're Facebook live streaming. So if you haven't heard about the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit in the past, we have a very simple vision: a sustainable and healthy Biscayne Bay. We do this with advocacy, communication with various groups, and education. We are a group, we call ourselves a steering committee. We're a group of volunteers. All of us have day jobs, but one big person that stands out a lot is our founder, Luis Rodriguez. So he actually started the first summit back in 2015. It took 2 years to have that take place in 2017. We had about 270 people attend from various sectors. We're talking government, academia, businesses, everybody with an interest in protecting the Bay. We had another big meeting, again at FIU at the Miami Beach Urban Studio in 2018 to plan for our Action Summit, which was even bigger than the 2017 event. We had hundreds of people, an entire day, talking about taking action to protect Biscayne Bay. So what are some of the big outcomes? The biggest one, I would say, is that the original summit and subsequent events, they were a catalyst for the Miami-Dade County Biscayne Bay Task Force. And today's focus is the task force, the report. We're encouraging support for that as well. We also help to increase some collaboration between the many groups that are out there protecting the Bay. And we brought new technologies. Last year, we even had a business from Israel that had a technology to address pollution issues. We're not alone though. There are many, many groups out there in Miami, in this area, trying to address issues relating to Bay health. And just a few weeks ago, if you were there at the climate march, we were literally screaming because we need to save our Bay. Different groups have different focuses. We have ours. But the main thing is, why is it that we're trying to protect the Bay? Number one is that it's a moral and ethical responsibility. We know that an unhealthy Bay is bad for human health. We also know that it's bad for marine health. We had the recent fish die-offs. We've had issues with seagrass. A lot of these things you'll hear about today. That photo on the bottom right of a duck literally swimming in trash, I took that picture myself in a local canal. But it's not only about that. The Bay is vital to our economy. So Bay health equals economic health for Miami-Dade County. So if you care about jobs in Miami-Dade County, you care about the Bay. You cannot have one without the other. The numbers you're seeing here is from a 2004 study that was conducted. $6.9 billion in income to our economy from Bay-related activities. So with that said, what are the goals for today? We want to share the Biscayne Bay Task Force recommendations. We want to encourage your support for these recommendations during the October 6th Miami-Dade County Board of County Commissioners meeting. And so reach out to your commissioners, reach out to your local leaders, and we want to help you take action to protect the Bay. Here's the breakdown for today. We're going to have Varela and Tiffany talk about the task force and the recommendations, all the great work that they did. We'll then break down the recommendations into different subject areas from the report itself, and we'll focus on some of them, essentially saying these are specific ways that these different recommendations can be implemented and why you should support them. We'll have a call to action by Steve Sauls, and we'll also have our closing remarks. Now, one person that's also critical to this whole effort is Mario Alejandro Ariza. He is the moderator for today. He is going to make sure that we're on track and we're well introduced. Now, I need to introduce Mario. I know I can't talk about all his accomplishments, but here's one thing. He knows the issues in the Bay. He knows our climate. He knows the local problems that we're facing. He's a reporter. He has a book, Disposable City. Now, I know I can talk about him all day long, but without further ado, let me introduce Mario. Mario Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that you can introduce the next speakers. Thank you, everybody.
Hey folks, good morning. The next speakers are going to be Aurélia Bagay and Tiffany Troxler. I'm going to briefly introduce them. Thank you so much for joining us, by the way. So we'll start off with Aurélia. Aurélia Bagay is the principal for the Bagay Group. It's a communications consulting firm with over 20 years of experience in Florida with expertise in water policy, sustainability, and resilience. She's a former member of the governing board of the South Florida Water Management District, which is a very tough position. And she recently served as chair of the Biscayne Bay Task Force and serves on the boards of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, City of Coral Gables Sustainability Advisory Board, and the Resilient Utility Coalition. She's also the host of a great podcast, the Resilient Forward podcast, and she can be found at times in the opinion pages of the Sun Sentinel. Now let's introduce Dr. Troxler. If you give me 1 second here. Well, that's not working. All right. Dr. Tiffany Troxler is an associate professor in the Department of Earth and Environment and serves as the director of science of the Sea Level Solutions Center in the Institute of Environment at Florida International University. Her research focuses on wetland ecosystems ecology. She does a lot of cool work out in the Everglades, and she informs the management and restoration of coastal and freshwater wetland ecosystems. She's also the project collaborator and working group co-lead in the Florida Coastal Everglades LTER program. Dr. Troxler is an ecologist whose work cuts across science, policy, and management of natural and urban environments. She has authored over 50 publications, served as co-editor and contributing author on 2 Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reports that guide national greenhouse gas inventories, and she's co-authored a National Academies of Sciences report on negative emissions technologies and co-edited the recent A Blue Carbon Primer, the State of Coastal Wetland Carbon Science, Practice, and Policy. She has convened or contributed to hundreds of events throughout Southeast Florida and to increase the awareness of and promote science-based solutions to climate change. She also serves on Miami-Dade County's Biscayne Bay Task Force. So these are 2 folks who really know what they're talking about. Please take it away.
Well, thank you for that fabulous introduction, Mario. We'll get started. I'm going to give a brief overview of the task force work. So as I was saying, the 2017 Marine Health Summit, we addressed the declining health of Biscayne Bay at that time. And let's see, next slide. Because of our efforts, on sounding that alarm, the Miami-Dade County Commission created the Biscayne Bay Task Force back in June of 2019 via a resolution introduced by Commissioner Rebecca Sosa. So the task force was charged with developing a final report with recommendations to improve the health of Biscayne Bay. We held 18 meetings, 35 presentations from experts from federal, state, county, municipal governments, academia, environmental organizations, and the general public. Let me go to my next slide. And we finalized our report a year later and recommended an overarching governing structure and an administrative structure that will work on developing a watershed management plan and implement over 60 recommendations. Under these 7 policy themes, we focused our main focus, obviously, on water quality, but we also addressed governance, infrastructure, watershed habitat restoration, natural infrastructure, marine debris, education and outreach, and of course funding, because we're going to have to figure out a way to pay for all the things we need to do. We'll hear more about these themes in detail later this morning, but honestly, we could not have predicted that our report would coincide the terrible fish kill and algal bloom event that we experienced recently. But what it did do is put a big spotlight on our report and made our recommendations all the more relevant today. So The good news is that because it shed such a big spotlight on our report, we presented our report to the commission just in time, and I'm pleased to share that our recommendations were very well received. And as a matter of fact, a number of resolutions have been already passed, including a state of emergency that we've been asking for some time. Coming soon, a fertilizer ordinance that's built into our recommendations and that our friends at the Water Keepers have been doing a great job working on with our commissioners at Miami-Dade. And of course, the hiring of a chief bay officer coming soon. This position, this person will help build partnerships and ensure that all these recommendations are implemented and not shelved as they've been done with previous plans for the health of Biscayne Bay. I also want to point out that there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. For example, there are reports that have been pending and stuck in the administration, such as the annual Bay report card and the septic report, just to name a few. So really, we hope that this gathering today will help educate all of us, will help ignite some real actions and keep the momentum going, because really this is the last call for the Bay. So with closing, I just want to thank the members of the Biscayne Bay Task Force, some of who are probably attending today and presenting with me and following me is a very dedicated task force member who was instrumental in developing our water quality recommendations with us, Dr. Tiffany Troxler from FIU. And I'm just handing it over to you, Tiffany. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you, Rilla, and thanks for all of your work on the chairing the task force. It was certainly not an easy job. All right, so I'm going to start with a little bit of context of what led to the big focus on water quality recommendations in the report. And not only in the context of specific water quality recommendations, but also in other policy domains that include hard and natural infrastructure, and importantly, recommending a watershed approach to Biscayne Bay recovery. So what has become increasingly evident over time is that there have been big changes both in Biscayne Bay and in the watershed that feeds Biscayne Bay. And this has resulted in a bay system that's highly vulnerable to degradation due to nutrient pollution and phosphorus in particular. This is a very oligotrophic or phosphorus poor or nutrient poor system in its historical state. So we know that stormwater runoff that transmits pollution from fertilizers, yard, pet waste, failing, poorly maintained and poorly sited septic systems that are also vulnerable to shallow groundwater tables, loss of natural habitats that otherwise can slow and filter water and suck up nutrients, ineffective or absent stormwater treatment infrastructure, sewer breaks. All of these things intersect to contribute to nutrient loading to the bay. And in some areas, this has resulted in a shift from a clear water bay ecosystem dominated by healthy seagrass that can support abundant marine life and those ecosystem services that Emilio mentioned earlier that support a clean water-based economy, to an ecosystem that with murky, algae-dominated water and little to no seagrass. Okay, there we go. And so what we've seen is a sustained decline in water quality that's resulted in an increasing area of seagrass die-offs and a recent fish kill that Arella and both Emilio and Arella alluded to earlier. And there have been numerous warning signs, with published reports by many scientists in the community, but also in call to action and numerous bay management plans that Arella referred to dated back to the early 80s. So the impacts of pollution are most evident in North Bay. So you can see the red area in the middle figure, that's the North Bay area, but also in the nearshore environment from the top of Biscayne Bay to the bottom of Biscayne Bay, we have evidence of nutrient pollution. And this chronic nutrient loading has led to macroalgae blooms. That was one publication back in 2013. Increasing microalgae in the water and seagrass die-offs that you can see on the right panel there in a report that was released by DERM in 2018. So let's zoom into northern Biscayne Bay. We know that we have had poor water quality coming out of Little River in the Little River Basin, dumping into northern Biscayne Bay. In some of the stations for over 20 years, we've seen annual geometric means that exceed the nutrient criteria for Biscayne Bay. And we don't have nutrient criteria for canals. We have nutrient criteria for Biscayne Bay, but the water coming out of that canal has been poor water quality in total phosphorus, total nitrogen for the last 20 years. And then the station, just along the coast there, we've seen exceedances for the last 10 years in both phosphorus and chlorophyll for that part of the bay. And we also have had recently some work done trying to understand where septic systems are and their potential vulnerability to increasing groundwater tables. And it's not to draw any, direct links necessarily, looking at correlations, but there are a lot of septic tanks in the Little River Basin, and about half of those that are there are suspected to be compromised by groundwater tables at least some time of the year. So let's go to the next slide. So and I'm going to read this to you, but what we need is, what we've seen is a sustained decline in water quality, increasing area of seagrass die-off, and recent fish kill, which indicate that urgent action is needed to decrease nutrient loading, to restore habitat, and fix infrastructure. We need deep reduction in nutrient loading, and we need that to be below the threshold that no adverse effects would be expected, starting with the nutrient criteria that we have available to us right now. And this is going to require long-term, coordinated, deliberate, and transparent effort and courageous leadership to act on the science that we have available to us now. And we need protective management so that we can safeguard Biscayne Bay with the expected changes coming from sea level rise and increasing temperatures, as well as those unexpected disturbances like infrastructure failures and episodic canal discharges. We need protective management so that we can increase the resilience of Biscayne Bay. And one, primary foundational focus of the Biscayne Bay Task Force was taking a watershed approach to this. We know that a lot of the nutrient loading is coming from land-based sources of nutrient pollution. And so we need deep reductions in those sources of nutrient pollution to have a chance to restore seagrass meadows to historic coverages. So the water quality recommendations, as I mentioned, there are specific water quality recommendations. You're going to hear during the panel how some of our stakeholders and collaborators are already moving forward on some of these recommendations, which include establishing what those science-based pollutant load reduction goals need to be, as well as interim targets so that we can reach those goals. And we need to start with the existing numeric nutrient criteria. It also involves a number of recommendations that help us to be more coordinated, to have the oversight that's necessary and the policy in place that can effectively provide for the protective management of Biscayne Bay to safeguard the bay and increase its resilience. And then also a number of specific recommendations in infrastructure. And I talked about septic, I talked about septic systems, sanitary sewer systems, stormwater systems, and the governance necessary. And there are specific recommendations that hit on each of these sources of nutrient pollution and potential sources of nutrient pollution in Biscayne Bay. And then also focusing in on the habitat restoration, but not just restoration of habitat within Biscayne Bay, but within the watershed itself to try to recover some of the nutrient pollution and filtering quality that our ecosystems and other types of green infrastructure can have in the watershed. So a key takeaway is that we don't need to separate climate change adaptation from Biscayne Bay recovery. We have, if we're going to be making investments going forward in the resilience of the greater Miami and the beaches, we can organize those efforts to adapt to climate change impacts, kickstart our economy, create equity, restore the watershed, and recover Biscayne Bay. These are mutually beneficial and complementary goals that will promote overall community resilience. And the Biscayne Bay Task Force specific recommendations that you're going to hear a deep dive on several of those during the panel is a roadmap for Biscayne Bay recovery. So thank you everyone for being here, and we all look forward to working with you going forward.
All right, folks, thank you so much. That was incredibly informative. We'll be moving on to a presentation from Emilio Lopez. Mr. Lopez is an expert in both physical and digital technologies, and he's going to be talking to us today about stormwater debris and pollution infrastructure, something that I tend to get very excited about. But a little bit about Mr. Lopez. He co-founded SOP Technologies after patenting a technology to prevent leaves, litter, and debris from entering stormwater systems and discharging them into waterways. Stormwater debris is a huge issue in the Bay. We know that many of the islands that are in the Bay are littered with, well, litter. So Mr. Lopez, thank you for taking it away.
So Mario did a fantastic job with the intro, better than what I can do. So I'll just skip my intro slide. So if you're seeing my screen here, or my video, this is actual trash that is from this past weekend that the Send It for the Seas, or nonprofit locally collected in our waterways. This is trash that didn't get into the system. Now, one thing that you notice here, it's actually fermenting in here, all these leaves, is that a lot of the stuff that gets into the bay through the stormwater systems is not trash, actually. It's a lot of leaves and organic matter. A huge volume of it is actually that. Now, that obviously presents challenges when it comes to nutrient pollution. So if you think about it from a global scale, there have been studies that have been done out there. A lot of the trash that goes out there, specifically when you talk about plastics, 80% of it is land-based. So this is actually a good thing because we have the opportunity to address that a lot easier than things that are based out in the ocean. So 80% of the plastics that get out into the waterway start on land. And as you saw from the previous slide, a lot of that starts off with trash that people drop in the streets. It goes into the opening on the side of the road or the grading. It goes through pipes, and then that goes straight out into the waterways without any treatment whatsoever. That's how it happens around the world. Another issue that a lot of people don't know about is that when these pipes are clogged with all of this trash and debris, as you can see down here, this photo is that of an actual storm drain locally in Miami-Dade County. When all that starts clogging up these pipes, it leads to flooding. The quote that you see there is from the City of North Miami website. And similar quotes are out there on many different websites. It's a very well documented issue. So what is it that we have done? We have gone out there with public works departments. We've gone out there with a nonprofit, Send It for the Sea. We've collected trash in front of storm drain inlets, and we've quantified it. In Dade County, based off of MS4 permit reports and other data, there are about 95,000 inlets. Each one of them receives about 175 pounds of trash. What does that mean? If you multiply that, we're talking about over 16 million pounds of trash every year, more than that, that's getting into the stormwater systems. Not all of that flows out into the bay, but this still represents thousands of pounds of phosphorus, thousands of pounds of nitrogen. It's a big deal. So I decided to ask the public works departments, whom are the people that I usually interact with. I sent them a survey this week, and they responded. Miami-Dade County Public Works responded in several different cities. And I asked them very straight up front. I said, during the next 12 months, which of the following Biscayne Bay Task Force recommendations do you support taking action upon within your jurisdiction? Every little check mark is for somebody that said yes to these specific recommendations. This means that we can take action. The public works departments want to take action. They're telling us they want to take action. They need our support. I also asked them about the flooding issues. Some of them say that it regularly happens. Others say it rarely happens. Now, this is flooding specifically caused by trash, litter, leaves that gets into the pipes. So let me explain this a little bit more. As you can imagine, this is a big issue. So there are many different types of technologies out there, different solutions. Generally speaking, the closer you are to the source, meaning on the roadway, the cheaper it is to collect and capture that trash. The further you go out into the waterways, the more expensive it is. So if you see down here, you see a street sweeping truck. So if you're able to prevent the trash from getting into the storm drains and you're able to sweep it, a University of Florida study calculated that it costs 5 times more to vacuum it out of the system using a vacuum truck when compared to street sweeping. Now those numbers are 2011, not adjusted for inflation. So you can think about how expensive it is to remove phosphorus and nitrogen when you're there. When you go further out into the waterways, it's even more expensive. And as I showed you before, if you're taking a look at my video, you can actually see that a lot of the stuff that gets into the system is leaves and organic matter. So all these cleanups that are happening, they're collecting the plastics, but what happens to the organics, right? They're still in there, they're degrading, and that's adding to the nutrient load to our bay. A very specific city that I wanted to highlight is Aventura. I met their stormwater manager back in 2017 during the Biscayne Bay Summit. They implemented filters to prevent trash and debris from getting into the stormwater system. Then using the same Florida DEP analysis tool and the recommendations from DEP, we're calculating that over 38,000 pounds of leaves, trash, and debris are prevented from getting into their systems and the bay every year. This is about 14 pounds of phosphorus and 30 of nitrogen. They're also saving money because, like I mentioned before, they're sweeping this trash now. They're not having to use the vacuum trucks as much as they used to. Okay, so they're actually saving money by preventing this pollution. Going back to the survey from public works departments, 100% of the people that responded, these are engineers, public works directors, stormwater managers, said that they agree with preventing the trash at the street and preventing it from getting into the bay. They also gave substantial qualitative input. So I just put in bold a few items here. They're saying the storm drain system should be cleaned out regularly, install structures to prevent the pollution, educate the public, label the storm drain systems, go to the schools, go from elementary to high school, tell people this is their responsibility, teach our youth. Then going more specifically to what you can do, I mentioned this earlier in the introduction, we want you to be able to take action. So I asked the public works departments, if there's an adopt a drain program where community members can collect and quantify this trash, do you support it? 80% said yes. So with that said, I want to close with this last slide here. So I've gone out there with Stand Up for the Seas, the nonprofit. I've gone out there with City of Miami Public Works. They've been extremely helpful with engineers sweeping trash and analyzing it to find out what's getting into the bay. If you want to do this with us, get in touch with me and we'll go out there and we'll help support your public works departments for the things that they've already said they want to do. They need your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emilio. That was incredibly informative. I'm going to follow up with a quick question from Stephen Leidner. I don't know if any actual county or city has a system like this, but Stephen raises a provocative question. we'll answer it briefly. Why not a polluter pays type system for shouldering some of these environmental and social costs, right?
Okay, so one of the challenges, especially in my area, is more of the stormwater pollution. It's called non-point source pollution, meaning that you cannot really pinpoint where it's coming from. A lot of these things, try and find the person that dumped this specific little container of oil into their stormwater system. It's very difficult, but there are fines that are out there if you are found throwing, for example, paint down a storm drain. And this is why one of the public works directors said, you need to label these storm drains, educate the public. This is not water that is treated. This goes straight out into the bay. So yes, there are fines. Public works departments are also saying we need to enforce the laws. That was one of those items that had a bunch of check marks from the survey, and it is a task force recommendation. So in some cases you can, it is illegal to dump into the stormwater systems. In some cases it's more difficult to find out who actually did it.
Very much, Amelia, for that presentation. That was great. And there's a lot of activism in this city, and obviously you're in this area. But there's a lot of cool people doing cleanups, but if we can stop it at the source, that would be quite amazing. Next, we're gonna hear from Todd Crowell, Dr. Todd Crowell, about water quality. A few notes quickly about Dr. Todd Crowell. He's the director of the Florida International University Institute of Environment, one of the university's preeminent programs. He joined FIU in 2014, and he's been leading the institute since then. He's been the principal investigator at FIU on National Science Foundation funded projects focused on aquatic chemistry and water contamination. His research interests, these are pretty cool: aquatic ecology, predator-prey interactions, that's important for the early 21st century, food web ecology, and most recently, urban stream ecology. As co-principal investigator of the Loquillo, Puerto Rico LTER, I don't know what that means, he has spent the last 25 years looking at energy flows between the riparian zones and the streams draining into the rainforest. So before joining FIU, Crowell was a postdoctoral fellow in Otago University and before taking a faculty position at Utah State. So he's traveled around. Let's welcome Dr. Todd Crowell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario. Well, good morning from our FIU Washington, D.C. office. I'm delighted to be here to talk about this very clear report that gives a very clear roadmap to where we need to go. And I think we're all here now to talk about how we're going to get there and how we're going to get there quickly. Let's see. I'm going to focus on some of the water quality aspects, and first I'm going to talk about these two very important and very challenging recommendations from the report. First, we got to remember that we have a lot of really dedicated local, state, and federal government and NGO folks already collecting really good, important data. So the first thing is we're not starved for any data. There are a lot of really good data sets. I think one of our challenges is there are also a lot of university and other NGOs collecting really important data sets, and those aren't always getting put in the same place. So it's really difficult to go find all the great data, put it together, and complete a full picture. And I think that's one of the challenges, and I think that's one of the really important recommendations that this report makes. So we need to think about that, and I'll come back to that in a minute about a general database. I think we also need to include some new or next generation sampling. So we've got a lot of people going out and collecting samples in places at specific times. But at FIU, we're developing new technologies using autonomous vehicles and putting these water quality sensors on them. So we need to include a more nimble sampling methodology that allows continuous data and over much larger spatial scales. And this is just an example. Within a couple hours of our receiving a call from Rachel asking if we knew anything about what was going on, we were able to set up a sampling design, and then Kevin Boswell was able to launch one of his autonomous vehicles and collect all of this data across the entire bay within one day. So we had ideas about to see if we could identify where the hot spots were there any hot spots? And these just show oxygen levels. There are about 10 parameters that you can click on any place and get the data. But anything in red showed sort of decreasing oxygen levels. So we could do all of that in one day at all of these places. And so I think we need to envision a unit or a bunch of these water quality sentinels that are cruising up and down the bay, looking for problems and sending us early warnings. And then once we identified a couple of the places where it seems suspect, we can drive these little tiny vehicles where you sometimes can't get larger boats up into places like Biscayne Canal, Little River, and again, get very fine scale data, but over a very short period of time. So I think we need to think about sort of additional types of data that will help us understand this very complicated landscape. We also need to have more continuous monitoring. So again, we're really good at going out and collecting samples every week or every 2 weeks, but we need sort of our eyes on the bay at all times. And so, and including nighttime observations, right? Most of the data we collect by hand are always collected during the day. So through our CREST Center of Excellence from the National Science Foundation, we've developed this buoy system where we can just float these things out there and they collect data 24/7. And I've given you, if you go to our website down here, I'm gonna try this. Hopefully you see the Institute website. If you go to our website and go down, you'll see monitoring Biscayne Bay. You can go to the buoys. You can look at the active buoys, where they're placed. Tiffany also has a Coral Gables Canal project ongoing. And then you can go to the data. And these are the data collected right now. Okay, so this is right now, 10:31, it's 10:45 now. These data came at 10:31. And so you can go up and choose any kinds of data, but this kind of data occurs constantly, right? So we can watch the bay all day and all night from your house. So, you know, if you get a chance, go look at the data and follow what's happening real time at the bay. All right. And that was just a snapshot of what we just saw. The other thing I want to concentrate on is this. This is really a key part of this recommendation, this document. Coordinate staff, annual budget to come up with a comprehensive data and research coordination thing. We need an interagency comprehensive Greater Biscayne Bay Watershed Program. And it has to be the whole watershed. It has to be from the bay all the way west, because as we just heard, much of the pollutants, much of the contaminants are coming from the land. So we need to think about this as a holistic landscape. It isn't trivial to talk about 6 or 7 agencies and 10 or 20 university scientists and 10 NGOs putting all their data in one pot and pulling out a comprehensive vision of what those data look like. But the little picture in the right comes from our colleague, Jason Hallstrom from FAU, and he's thinking about this. He's building the capacity to sort of bring in disparate data sets and figure out how to serve them in a sort of comprehensive way in which the data are interoperable. And that's a key term, interoperable data. And we also need to be able to disseminate these data quickly for policy decisions, and we need to make them visual. We need to make them understandable for people. I don't expect everybody to look at those complicated graphs I just showed you. They mean a lot to me in one glance, but they don't mean much to most people. So we got to think about how we serve these data in a near real-time manner, and a manner that's most digestible for the most of the people. The other recommendation is we need to secure funding for new pilot projects. You know, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's a lot of examples out there, the Hudson River, the Chesapeake Bay, the California Bay, and close to home, the Tampa Bay programs. Those programs all have been able to bring in state and federal resources, private resources, put those all together and create comprehensive plans, and they all have shown remarkable success. So we need to just look around, figure out what other people are doing, but we need to get going, and we need to get going quickly. The other part, though, is there are other ways of thinking about funding opportunities. And I just want to take 1 second to introduce a new FIU program that we've just launched called Environmental Finance and Risk Management. And that is really a program to bring in the business side of the world, to actually create funding opportunities for resilience, for the environment, and quite frankly, for the future of South Florida. The Europeans are developing things like catastrophe bonds and market bonds and green bonds, where people are actually paying into these bond markets with the notion that we're going to have catastrophic events, and that somehow there has to be a pool of money that we can access and be able to quickly put those funds into work to sort of fix the things we have. Okay, so it's easy to think about that from a hurricane perspective or an earthquake perspective, but let's think about it from a more general environmental perspective. Everglades restoration, Biscayne restoration and management. And so we're quite excited about that program that's just now launching. So we need holistic modeling, we need implementation, but that's not enough. We have to empower the citizens that live in the Biscayne Bay watershed. That's everybody, folks. I don't care if you live 10 miles west, you're in the Biscayne Bay watershed. We've got to empower everyone to understand the information. So education is key. And with that, I turn it over to my friend, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crowell. That was very impressive. I'm actually really looking forward to digging into and diving into some of the data that you've collected. And I look forward to having a conversation with you later about where I might find it and how to perhaps make it more public facing. Because that's really powerful stuff, especially for people who may be, living here or thinking about coming and visiting. We're gonna now go to Rachel Silverstein, Miami's waterkeeper. Rachel Silverstein joined Waterkeeper as the executive director in June 2014. Before that, she was a Nous Sea Grant Fellow and professional staff at the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee's Subcommittee on Oceans, Atmosphere, Fisheries, and Coast Guard in Washington, D.C. She also loves to scuba dive. I should have introduced her as Dr. Rachel Silverstein because she's got a PhD from the Department of Marine Biology and Fisheries at the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine Science and Atmospheric Science. Which isn't a mouthful at all. We call it Rasmus. So folks, somebody who really does a lot of work, and not that y'all don't do a lot of work in the community, but I do see Rachel a lot. Dr. Silverstein, thank you. Take it away.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and for the whole Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit committee for putting this awesome event together to highlight the really key recommendations from the Biscayne Bay Task Force and really staying focused on solutions for moving forward for Biscayne Bay, particularly after this difficult summer. So Todd, thank you so much for teeing up the talk perfectly. I'm going to focus today on the outreach and education portion of the Biscayne Bay Task Force recommendations that are really important, as Todd mentioned, for making change and getting our whole community involved. Let's see here. So for those of you who don't know, Miami Waterkeeper is a nonprofit focused on ensuring swimmable, drinkable, and fishable water for all. We are focused entirely on Miami-Dade and Broward counties. And we focus on clean water, water pollution issues, of course, but also habitat and habitat protection, which for us here in South Florida, you've got your seagrasses, you've got mangroves and coral reefs, as well as amazing wetland habitats. And also sea level rise. And sea level rise, of course, affects all the other issues that we work on here in South Florida and makes a lot of the pollution problems that we're facing much worse. So we have a combined approach where we use outreach and education, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail, along with scientific research, which is really the core of all of the policy that we support, and much like all of the task force recommendations and Tiffany and Todd's work, very founded on the science and the data. And we also do advocacy work. So we work with a lot of elected officials on policy changes like these. And we will go to court if people are breaking environmental laws and polluting. So the key to having a culture shift and really long-lasting change is, of course, education and outreach. And here are some of the key education and outreach recommendations that came out of the task force. These are fantastic recommendations, and Dave Dobler, who's going to be speaking next about marine debris issues, is going to follow up in a lot more detail about some of the cleanup and debris related issues. I'm going to focus today on two particular recommendations, the multimedia and educational outreach programs, and the Fertilizer Ordinance piece, which is going to be on the county agenda October 6th. And I hope everybody watching comes out in full support of a really awesome piece of legislation that's going before the county that can have a really positive effect on the Bay that I will go into more as well. So I want to give you some really concrete ways that you can get involved in the effort to protect Biscayne Bay. Here are some of the ways to do it. These are not by any means all the ways. If you are a student in high school, we have a junior ambassador program. This teaches environmental leadership training. Our cohort for this year just started. In non-COVID times, this involves a series of meeting in classrooms and learning and speaking to elected officials with going out on the water, doing water sampling, pollution monitoring, cleanup events, restoration projects. This has now been made completely virtual, but please check out our website for more information on this if you know of youth in the next generation who want to get involved. Here's a picture of water sampling from that program as well. And then really key also, we have our 1,000 Eyes on the Water outreach program. This is a program that teaches any member of the public of any age to observe, document, and report pollution that they might see going about their daily lives. So how do you know when you're walking by the water, when you're at the end of your street and you see your storm drain, you're kayaking, how do you know that something's okay or not okay on the water? And the goal here is to train 500 members of the public. We have just recently reached that goal, and now we might have to rename it to like 10,000 Eyes on the Water, something like that. Stay tuned, but here's some examples of some really common pollution reports that we get from the public. And this report is of an oil slick. You can see the rainbow sheen in the water. This report was actually made by one of our junior ambassadors. So nice program crossover there, but everybody may or may not be aware of what they're seeing around them and problems that it can cause. And some of these things may seem small, but it's really death by 1,000 cuts for Biscayne Bay when all of these different pollution events build up together. We get lots and lots of reports like this of sediment plumes. So recently the city of Miami's taken a lot of action with Commissioner Ken Russell really pushing to get these kinds of events stopped. Which is often coming from construction sites that are letting sediment go down storm drains. We also get cool reports through this program, and this was 2 small-toothed sawfish, which are highly endangered. The first time they've been filmed in this part of Biscayne Bay, 2 together. So this was pretty exciting. This was during the initial COVID shutdown when the waters were very quiet. And we also have had, during the recent fish kill, really critical information coming from the public who have been reporting in terrible incidences like this that they're seeing. And we were able to track all of these community reports that came in from the fish kill in maps. We've now made GIS maps as well. And this actually informed scientists and managers of where the fish kill was happening, where it was most severe. And even I spoke to the Secretary of DEP, and they were using this map as well. So the citizen reports really became critical to understanding what was going on the water. We also have our water quality monitoring program. We monitor 11 sites around Biscayne Bay for bacteria levels. We put everything on a swim guide app along with the data that's collected weekly from the Department of Health and Surfrider Miami, who's also collecting weekly water quality monitoring information. So check that out. You'll either see a red or a green for whether or not the water quality levels are meeting standards set by EPA for safety for swimming. And then I'm going to skip over a little bit of this. This is our Ransom Everglades Boat Patrol program where we go out with their students. But I really want to get into, this is also covered by folks about the connection to nutrient pollution, to the fish kill that happened, and to the decline of seagrass in Biscayne Bay. The proposed fertilizer ordinance that's going to be on the county agenda October 6th. The really key pieces of this include having a blackout period where fertilizer is not allowed to be applied from May to September, having buffer zones around waterways, and controlling the mixes of fertilizers so that we're not over fertilizing our waterways, causing algae blooms, causing seagrass die-off, and eventually these fish kills. This legislation is very strong. It is protective of the Bay. We fully support its adoption, and we have on our website an action alert so that you can easily make a comment to the county commission, hopefully showing your support of this ordinance. And there's some talking points about what to say. So definitely check on our website and social media for more information about that. But we're really hopeful that this will lead the way. And of course, this is one of the key recommendations out of the Biscayne Bay Task Force that will be legislation adopted on the immediate time frame, which would be fantastic. But this alone is not going to solve all of the nutrient pollution problems in the Bay. As Irela mentioned, we still have much more work to do, particularly on infrastructure projects. But this is an amazing first step, and let's all get behind enacting this task force recommendation. And of course, Dave is going to talk to us about cleanups and marine debris issues and other ways to get involved by helping keep our waterways clear. Also have to mention very quickly that it is also Miami Waterkeeper's 10th anniversary. We're going to be celebrating next week by releasing a 3-part series called Waves of Change that's going to tell the story of Miami's water, past, present, and future. So we're really excited about this. Be sure to tune in. It's a great educational piece, and we also have curricula involved with that. If you do want to watch it with your families, there's also educational materials to help folks learn about Biscayne Bay and our waterways and our connection to the Everglades ecosystem. Thank you so much. Happy to take questions.
All right. There's a great question from Adam in the chat, but unfortunately we're running 12 minutes behind schedule. So we are going to shift right over to Dave Dobler. Dave is an environmental activist with an impressive amount of wins. He's gotten the county to stop using uncovered polystyrene boating docks, and he's, well, Dave gets results. So let's listen to Dave.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. You care about the Bay, which is why you're here. And so my number one takeaway for everybody is to download and document this. Download and read the task force recommendations and figure out how you can get involved using your own skills, whatever you can bring to the table, and help us bring it to the fight. So my topic is to discuss the sections of the task force report around marine debris. And so there were 7 recommendations that came out of the task force, and a lot of work and a lot of thought was developed in this very specific section. And so what I wanted to do is highlight a couple of the my thoughts as I was reading this. So 5A was create a comprehensive marine debris prevention, reduction, and removal program within DERM and to adequately fund and staff the program. The good news is that NOAA already leads the Florida Marine Debris Reduction Plan. So there's already a program that we can jump in on, that we can all get engaged with and sort of use that plan to start off with. I also discovered something really super interesting in that 32 entities operate together on Miami-Dade County's MS4 stormwater permit. That is basically a discharge permit, which allows entities to discharge water into the Bay. But each of the entity reports their annual report to DEP in Tallahassee and not DERM. So this actually presents a phenomenal opportunity for each of these entities to submit their annual plans to DERM and then have Durham provide oversight and collaboration where we can improve design and maintenance programs. I think this is a really, really key aspect here because we're not collaborating right now. And when we do collaborate, we can accomplish much more. And that's exactly what happened with the Marine Health Summit. 5B is to establish a marine debris working group to promote collaboration on ways to reduce marine debris. And what I realized was that we have 32 individual cities and entities that have in-house public works departments. So we already have the knowledge and experience in-house to develop best practices, to develop peer mentorship to design and maintenance, and to do peer reviews and meetings and work together. The wonderful news is that we have amazing talent that I already know we have within individual cities and counties and public works departments. So I think if we collaborate more and have some peer review and mentorship, we can make a lot of progress together. Number 5C is through the Miami-Dade County Police Department, direct Marine Patrol Unit to prioritize its commitment to the enforcement of all applicable laws having a nexus to the environmental health of Biscayne Bay and the tributary. So what's interesting about this is that Marine Patrol are always out there. Every time I'm out kayaking, I always get a police boat passing by, and they are the eyes and the ears of the bay. And so I would love to see them watching for illicit discharges from construction sites, sunken boats, and reporting them. They can also serve as a valuable resource for water quality sampling to get more data because they're already in their boats. I also think that we need to focus on island maintenance because a lot of the debris from the islands comes from inadequate garbage cans and a lack of pack it out behaviors of day visitors to the islands. And there is zero recycling, even though 50% of the trash is aluminum. Conducting an analysis of marine debris in Biscayne Bay. The two top primary sources of marine debris, in my opinion, are stormwater systems and canals. So let's start there. Adapt a target maximum input level policy for trash. I think this is a tremendous opportunity. Total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs, set a threshold for the amount of pollutants going into the watershed. TMDLs exist for nutrient and bacteria, but oddly enough, they do not exist for trash. Why? Because the EPA does not classify trash as a pollutant under the Clean Water Act. That is surprising to me. So Miami-Dade County should adopt a maximum input level policy for trash. And I'll show you an example at my next slide. Evaluate the various existing stormwater outfall systems throughout the county to determine their effectiveness in preventing debris from entering Biscayne Bay. So I first think we need to start with maintenance schedules. Most entities are cleaning their stormwater systems, including the county, once every 5 to 7 years. Here in Miami Beach, we are now actually cleaning our stormwater systems once every 1 year, and more frequently if necessary in some hot spots. And the amount of trash and debris that is going through our stormwater systems is significantly less than what it used to be. And so we've got a very engaged public works department who's been doing some amazing work, and this is an easy area for us to start. 5G is identify and establish dedicated and recurring funding sources to pay for marine debris prevention and removal activities. So my theory here is this, that the government can focus on prevention and capture within the stormwater systems, within the conveyors that they own. And I think that volunteers can help support removal activities. Our nonprofit volunteercleanup.org is a website that lists all of the local cleanups hosted by local individuals and entities. And so we can get community involvement, and that also addresses the educational component. And why can't the sanitation departments within each of the entities lead a Clean Your Neighborhood Day, right? If we catch it at the street, if we change behaviors, then we don't have as much going out into the bay. So this takes me to a single county resolution that I am a proponent for, which is establishing a total maximum daily load, a TMDL, for nearshore and offshore debris. This regulation should include incremental targets to reach zero trash entering the bay within a certain time frame. And this resolution would compose of 4 sections that all map to very specific recommendations in the Task Force report. One is you conduct baseline monitoring studies to see where it's coming from. 2, you evaluate the existing trash pollution controls to determine the best opportunities to eliminate trash from entering the basin. 3 is adopting a maximum input level, just like we do for other pollutants, and that then will lead to entities utilizing technological, educational, regulatory, and enforcement measures to meet the county's total input level goals. So I'm going to end with a little promotion of what is happening right now. That is International Coastal Cleanup Season. As I started this conversation, I said everyone should read the task force recommendations and figure out what unique skills that you have in order to participate and help out. Now, one skill that we all have is giving a little bit of our time. And so International Coastal Cleanup Season is happening now, and it goes through November 1st. Basically, you can join a small organized cleanup or do-it-yourself cleanup. You can find all of that information on volunteercleanup.org. We've even got some contests and prizes, so take a screenshot of this, and you can find all the data at volunteercleanup.org. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dave. We're going to be moving on to Patrick Shearer. He is the lead stormwater designer and designer of green infrastructures and natural systems and a restoration engineer at eSciences Miami office. He spent 13 years doing this kind of stuff, and he's going to be talking to us a little bit about watershed, habitat restoration, and natural infrastructure. Mr. Shearer, take it away.
Can everybody hear me? Am I still muted? Okay, yes. Looks like you can hear me. Okay, good. Here's my presentation. I'm going to try to go through it quickly. I can't tell if it's in presenter mode or regular mode. But anyway, I'm going to follow up on all the points that everyone else has made this morning. And the number one thing is education and maintenance. So here's an image of Storm Inlet in Little Havana in Miami near Jose Marti Park. And here's a little sign in the neighborhood for the residents who don't want pollution and all this trash to go down the inlets in the stormwater system. And this is a key cause of a lot of the drainage issues, and the flooding is exacerbated by these issues of not maintaining the system. So we'll go through this a little bit. And to follow up on what other people like Dave were saying about TMDLs, they're pollution diets for the waterways. And a lot of other places in Florida have already had impaired waters and have been dealing with fixing these with TMDLs for a long time. And here's just a list of a couple of them that are local near us. And Lake Okeechobee, obviously they've been working on it for several years. The most recently added watersheds, this map shows a lot of them. The Caloosahatchee and St. Lucie Estuary and the Loxahatchee River are the nearest ones to us that have been added to the impaired waters and created basin management action plans, which are state-led plans where they get lots of funding and millions of dollars to help retrofit their systems and identify the low-hanging fruit so they can clean up the pollution and achieve these pollution load targets, basically pollution diet for the waterways. And basically this map shows that most of Florida has impaired waters. The gray areas are impaired waters that do not have plans to address them. So we are that area. So obviously you can see we have 3 million residents, and it's a big issue being so hyper urbanized. And the Biscayne Bay has been on this map for several years. I've been watching it, nutrient impairments, and Little River has dissolved oxygen. And I've sort of been astounded that we haven't taken action until now. because I work in this sector. And to follow up on the task force recommendations that I really agree with and feel that are very pertinent for infrastructure, which is what I'm covering, are these. So 1C is activate DERM's programs, and basically they have a lot of programs, and we just need to feed DERM the information so that they get more boots on the ground. So there's been groups like Send It for the Sea, nonprofits educating the public and really bringing these pollution issues, sediment plumes in front of our commissioners, bringing them to DERM. You can get the 311 app, which is a Miami-Dade app, and report these issues yourself. Please report them also to Miami Waterkeeper, 1,000 Eyes on the Water, and the DERM Environmental Complaints section, because without this info, they're not going to be able to track down these illicit discharges and be able to follow up with, is it really a problem, and who needs to be fined or shut down. And thank goodness that Commissioner Russell is working on really upping the ante and making this a real program where they're not just looking the other ways. Because if there isn't much compliance on the ground, the existing laws we have that say you can't pollute like this don't really matter if they're not being enforced. So we need you to report these to the public, and these clogged pipes are really big drainage issues, and it's making sea level rise and king tides much worse. So with that in mind, recommendations 1D and 1F really play into pollutant load mapping. We need to map and identify the hotspots, and with you reporting those hotspots, that really helps us make our maps more accurate. On the left, you'll see a map of nitrogen load mapping that we did for another locality that was experiencing fish kills in the Indian River Lagoon. And these types of maps are critical to figuring out where is the pollution coming from, where is it being concentrated to. On the map on the right, you'll see the canals, and the yellow spots are the dead zones of seagrass loss areas. So you can sort of see the canals are a main conveyor of the nutrient pollution. And these inlets I show in my photos, these are from Little Havana neighborhood last week. So these are causing major drainage issues, I can tell you. And if we don't spend the money there, building new projects right away isn't going to fix the king tide and drainage issues, recurrent flooding. We need maintenance. So the task force recommended that. We need DERM and the localities to follow up. Albert will discuss funding a little bit more, but we also need the public and the cities to support and really get behind these pilot projects. We have several going on in Miami-Dade and Miami specifically, and I'm working on 2 of them. Jose Marti Park is an adaptive redesign for sea level rise, but we're also majorly upgrading the water quality treatment out of several of the outfalls that flow through the site and helping with some of the flooding issues in the neighborhood. But I can tell you, after popping all the neighborhood inlets, the manholes, and they even have some inlet protectors, not like Amelia's Stop Ocean Pollution type, but a different older version. And these inlets are completely filled with leaves, debris, trash. And I have a survey from 2000 from a different project that was, we have data on Jose Marti, and all of the inlets at our park were clogged at that time too. So I'll show you a picture later of how it's allowing it not to drain and making king tides worse. But the pictures on the right show a Woon Earth project that we're working on in Wynwood, which is a pilot project for a green living street, which will absorb pretty much all of the stormwater. And it's really going to reduce flooding issues and help bring in resiliency. So these type of projects, we really need to champion and install them. These are still in design right now, but they need to get built. So we have an example of what works and what everybody else needs to be doing. And we're setting them up as designed experiments so we can learn from these projects and use them as a toolbox to replicate them in the watershed. And we need people to get behind these and attend the public meetings and the commissioners to promote these because they do work. We've installed them in other places. We're going to prevent tidal flooding, rainfall flooding, so it is a big deal. This is an example of what these green living streets could look like. And currently 4 blocks of Wynwood is what we're looking to retrofit. And it will really highlight what green infrastructure can do for the watershed and be a holistic approach we can adapt to other places. So septic systems, I'm going to run through these to get us moving. Septics, we have 100,000 in Miami-Dade County, and this is a Florida problem. It's not just Miami-Dade, and other places have really led the way in front of us. So we can learn a lot from those places like Brevard County, Martin County, and other urbanized areas, but those are really good examples. Brevard County, for instance, found, Mayor Jimenez has said, hey, $7,500 to retrofit all of the septics. We can't afford it. Well, guess what? Brevard County found retrofitting only 4% of the septics after doing a really big study of where is the pollution coming from. They found we could retrofit only 4 of them to septic to sewer and get a 20% load reduction from the watershed. And they found septics within 165 feet of canals or waterways were the big contributors. And there's even lower cost solutions that you can do than converting them. Some septic systems that won't be compromised by sea level rise, we could adapt them to have advanced treatment. And also they found that replacing the septic clean out caps, which usually get broken, they're the 4-inch little white caps with a white square piece that sits above the ground, and people run over them with their truck, lawnmower, public works vehicle, and they connect the house to the septic, and even sewers have those. And when those get broken, floodwaters get into them and they double, or they can triple, they can make the treatment load much, much greater. And by fixing those caps, we can reduce the problem at a very low cost. So we need to identify where's the septics that we can fix on the short term and focus on those. And we could save a lot of money. And then with the pollution hotspots, once they're mapped, we need to come up with cost-effective pilot projects that not only hit the pollution requirements, but also sea level rise, resiliency, tidal issues, drainage issues, and other equity issues in the neighborhood. So it's really important, being in such a hyper urban area, that if we're doing projects, they need to hit the triple bottom line. And not everyone understands how to do that. And we have a unique expertise, having done a lot of this work, that we can help the county and municipalities focus on that, because they need to spend what little money is available cost effectively to get the most bang for the buck. And real quickly, we're going to need a couple large scale projects, very innovative things like algal turf scrubbers. They've been done a lot of other places around Florida and found that they can get thousands of pounds out of the canals and really polluted waterways. And some places we're going to need some of these advanced innovative pilot projects, and they can hit the triple bottom line, also creating other economies and products. And also, this is my final slide, but these are the inlets in Jose Marti and Little Havana, and they're really clogged. And without us doing maintenance and having a much better maintenance plan and how we're pulling it off, these inlets are going to keep causing these recurrent flooding issues. This is an example at the park of where the king tide has gone down. It's at low tide, but the water's still flooding the park. There's an inlet there to discharge it, but it's been filled with sediment for like 20 years from what I can tell. And that's what's causing a lot of these issues. So we really need maintenance. So that's the take home and education. So if we have any questions, I send it back to you, Mario. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. We're moving quickly today, folks, so we're going to transition over to Albert Gomez. Albert is consistently one of the more interesting folks that I run into in Miami. He's sort of like a technical and governmental gadfly in this town. He's a kind of a Renaissance man, and I do appreciate all of his interventions in the Miami civic life. Albert, take it away, sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, so I wanted to discuss funding today. I think everybody's presentation really addressed technical and very pointed, specific concerns.
Albert,
I think that what
we don't have your share screen.
Okay, hold on 1 second. I did share, but I'll share again. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. Are we good, guys? Everyone there? Okay, here we go. Okay.
Good, thank you.
No problem. Let me get that back. So basically, everyone spoke on very specific technical issues. What I would say is one of the biggest concerns is, let me get this out of here. Excuse me. I'm going to have to do this. Hold 1 second, folks. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a second. Do you guys see my bar down here? Okay, thank you. Okay, apologize. All right, here we go. Okay, so effectively, they were dealing with poignant issues, but one of the points that I've noticed is that some of these very, very achievable and accessible solutions have a tendency of being slightly out of reach. And it usually falls into political will. As all of you know, getting angry, being strong about certain things gets you only so far. We've started to realize at the summit that, you know, we obviously get more bees with honey. And effectively, we are trying to bridge partnerships. And those partnerships are critical to form political consensus, both from a hyperlocal level at the community level, but also within the halls of government. And the reality is we're trying to create a bridge for that. Ultimately, you can create all the collaboration you like, but if you do not match it with funding, it will not go. The fact is first what Todd mentioned and what Tiffany mentioned often, as well as pretty much almost every presentation, is that we need to increase measurement and monitoring. I think everyone knows the saying, things that get measured get done. The reality thing is in the halls of government, things that get funded get done. And if they don't get funded, they will not get done. So we wanted to point that out. So we moved to the recommendations. On the top of the screen, you'll see the current Biscayne Bay Task Force recommendations. And I wanted to try to synthesize them a little bit further so it becomes tangible and usable. I only have one slide today, which is this one right here. I want you to focus on the words and really read through these recommendations. I don't want to fly through them. I want to go very specifically and read through them. So we want to go collaborate with Miami-Dade legislative delegation and congressional delegates to secure annual appropriate funds to support Biscayne Bay watershed restoration. There are legislative aides, senators, representatives on this presentation right now. They are listening. I would point to the fact that there are plenty of active and state federal funding opportunities, currently funded projects. There are pertinent agencies that are deferring funds and activating funds towards problems right now. We need some legislative action. And the way we see that legislative action being brought forward is through harmonizing existing state and federal funding to align with projects that are pointed at within the task force recommendations. And we can go as big or as small as you want. If you want to go big, we can all point to the Army Corps of Engineers back-based study. You know, I think that everybody kind of had their hands up in the air when they saw a 30-foot wall proposed for Biscayne Bay. Obviously, we're talking about saving the bay, not building a wall in the bay. But effectively, we know we have other solutions that can support storm surge remediation and also give us those triple bottom line opportunities that if you put money towards something, why not get secondary and tertiary benefits from that? And that's where these natural system solutions come to bear. We're pushing for a natural systems solution approach to that sort of solution set. We're hoping that they hear it through these recommendations and through our legislators so that we set sort of modicums of standards and they push that forward as the way we do business here in Biscayne Bay and Miami-Dade County. Effectively, we can go to the hyperlocal level and look at the agencies that are supporting programs right here, such as the DEP, Durham, which has a trust fund, South Florida Water Management Districts that is funding various projects, as well as FIND, the Florida Inland Navigation District, a very little known agency, but one that's very rich with capital. Giving those agencies opportunities to co-collaborate and share costs with our local agencies, we can get there. We need federal and legislative support to do that. Moving to the second recommendation, immediately engage in legislative process to designate the Biscayne Bay license plate. Now that is something that has to happen at the state level, FDOT, as well as down here supported through the county level. We felt that to just put a license plate creates another fund. If we don't put tails to that fund, we really can't get anywhere. So we wanted to get dedicated funding to source natural system restoration in Biscayne Bay and support of. And where I was writing and giving other scenarios, that is our hyperlocal's government responsibility. Let's find supportive issues for that license plate to fund. Let's get a list of things that we need to have funding for. And that's one of the kind of the wish list that we're hoping that our commissioners here locally in Miami-Dade County can actually write it, focus it. But effectively, once you're speaking in a commission standpoint, you got to migrate it into a more central pinpointed area. The way to do that is to create some sort of program, and I'll speak to that in the later recommendations. And we'll speak to a plan and we'll speak to a board. Moving to number 3, immediately enter into cost-sharing programs with partnerships. Again, repeating, cost-sharing programs. Miami-Dade County, as you see below, via DERM, has that Biscayne Bay Environmental Enhancement Trust Fund. That is a rich fund. It's fed by millage, as well as Miami-Dade Water and Sewer has a relatively large budget. And as we all know, we are under a federal consent decree. We need to do everything we can to try to reach those consent decree goals. Effectively, if we offset the funding by sharing it amongst these different agencies, we might be able to get there, and we need to point that as a priority at commission. If we can address that almost on a monthly commission basis, we can get there. I don't see the consent decree brought up in every single meeting as it should. We are mandated via federal government to fix what we're putting into the bay. It is our responsibility to, as citizens, to ask our commissioners to bring this issue up every month and address it and push for progress, because ultimately that is what's pointing to the problem. We are not changing our ways fast enough, and we've seen the results over the last few months. Moving to 7D, we collaborate with Florida Inland Navigation District to immediately identify projects to improve water quality and restoration for Biscayne Bay watershed. When we move down to details, we can actually develop a direct fund to support project pipelines. That is the commission's responsibility, to identify the problems and find solutions for them, or listen to the stakeholders, the community advocates, and people that are at the ground level, looking at the problems and bringing up solutions, such as our institutions like Florida International University and the different universities that are supporting different research. We should develop that direct fund and have a board developed that can support organizing and managing that pipeline of projects. That is why we're suggesting the development of a Miami-Dade Watershed Board. We'd like to have people talk about that on October 6th, beyond the support of the Fertilizer Ordinance, knowing that the sooner we can get a watershed board activated, the sooner we can get board members assigned, and the sooner we can get let's say a Chief Bay Officer put in place, we can get that funding resource allocated and then organized. And then we move to 7E, where we leverage municipal finance resources through interlocal agency agreements to supplement county funds. This is hypercritical. We had this problem in the past when we looked at existential threats through climate change and sea level rise across the counties, and we developed the Southeast Regional Climate Change Compact. We know how to do intergovernmental platforms or mechanisms. So effectively, we just need to make it hyperlocal. Whether it be a compact, the reality is there are shared municipalities. If we had a plan, a watershed plan, if we had a watershed board, if we had a Chief Bay Officer, we can coalesce them into the basins themselves. As Patrick showed, it is a smoking gun. You can see where the seagrass is dying. They are directly in the path of outflows in the canals and rivers. Realistically, if we were to understand how that water was moving around, we'd better understand where settlement is happening, where we're having concentrations and such. And that's what many of the scientists have asked me. We need a new circulatory model. So things like that, septic tank rebate programs, programs that the board could move forward, advanced water quality monitoring programs. I think Todd spoke to that often. Yes, we have plenty of resources, but we're not aggregating. Not everyone can give their resources and data to DERM. Well, then let's get them certified. A good example of that is the City of Miami Police. They've entered into an MOU with FIU. I've reached out to the police chief of Miami-Dade as well, and they are interested. They want to retask their officers, their Marine Patrol officers, to be eyes on the ground and actually water sample. They don't just want to be taxis to scientists. They want to actually do the sampling themselves. That would immediately aggregate at least 20 to 30 sampling agents out there doing sampling and feeding DERM so that we can get a better water picture. The faster we fast track that, the faster we can get better data. Things that get measured get done. I reference that again. We move forward to that intergovernmental, interlocal agreement reality, which is also discussed on 7F, which is mechanisms. You know, how do you develop these mechanisms? Well, a lead to that mechanism and that interlocal government agreement is to create these basin-specific municipality plans. These are basin action plans within the watershed plan. Understand that each basin has a shared vulnerability and threat and risk and shared cost. A good example, which we'll hear a little later, is Little River, El Portal, Upper East Side, Morningside, Miami Shores. All of them have a different economic, socioeconomic condition. West Little River is different than East Little River. Upper East Side is very different than Miami Shores. There are these different dynamics, but they all share vulnerabilities. So they should share costs. Bringing them together, giving them a plan that works together could help share millage hyperlocally. It could help spread the costs, and it also can help prioritize the biggest risks, i.e., for instance, Little River and the septic tank concern. And then we moved forward to 7F, those mechanisms. We look at the trust fund and we point to assessment fees potentially. Right now, if you're building a high rise, you can put 1,000 residents in a tiny footprint, but you're not necessarily getting the assessment fees you should based on what they're going to impact in the stormwater, the sewer system, and basic just runoff. The reality is we need to reassess those so that they're actually matching to the load. I think that those are little things that can be done if we had a watershed board that could prioritize these projects and basically more clearly assess the risk and vulnerabilities. And then finally, we go to direct the preparation of a report of potentially funding sources for the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs. And effectively, that gets mechanized with a champion. That's the Chief Bay Officer that could do that. That officer could work with the watershed board. If they had staff, they can listen to each of the researchers, listen to the people that have their head on the ground, and basically bring forward the reports and the data and drive pilot projects. And one thing I would like to say is we can finally move some of these pilot projects to scale. We don't always want to exist in the pilot environment. We want to exist in identifying successes and migrating them into operational, across the board, best management practices that we can replicate time and time again. The only way to do that is to really allow that Chief Bay Officer to not be inculcated into another agency. So we're really asking that Chief Bay Officer to directly connect to the mayor, be able to get that connection through, and also sit on that watershed board to oversee it, drive it forward, and make sure that those research, reports, and pilots get driven into actual policy throughout the county. So thank you. Hopefully we can get engaged and actually move some dollars to actual practice. We're hoping that everyone joins on October 6th so we can talk about funding and we can talk about mechanizing these solutions. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Albert. I really appreciate that. Now, folks, for the pièce de résistance, we're going to hear from the head of DERM himself. DERM is the county's Division of Environmental Resources and Management. We're going to hear from Lee N. Hefty. He may even tell us what the N stands for in his name. Mr. Hefty, take it away.
Good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay, somehow my video isn't shared. But good morning, everyone. Very interesting and exciting to hear the presentation. I don't have a significant presentation, but I can talk a little bit about some of the stuff that I've heard. I agree with a lot of what was said today. I think the concept of getting an organization developed here in the county that will help elevate Bay watershed restoration needs is really exciting. I think it's something that can help drive energy behind the health of Biscayne Bay, looking at the watershed. I think the challenges are not out in the Bay as much as they're in the watershed. So we definitely need to look at the quality of the water that runs off the landscape. Still trying to get my video. Good morning, there I am. So, you know, we know that the Bay is reacting to what we've done on the landscape. When you look at historically, pre-development, the Everglades system, you know, ran much further east up to the coast, and it was a filtering system for all the water on the landscape. What happened over the last 120 years is we developed on the land, we channelized the flow, we drained it, we've minimized the ability for the landscape to treat the water at the same time that we've created impacts that could potentially be providing nutrients to the system. So we've taken away the filter and we've added more potential for pollution. So we need to look at how we can better manage that system going forward so that the Bay can continue to thrive despite the fact that we have nearly 3 million people that live here. With respect to funding, that you know, Albert had mentioned, funding is really important. Energy behind getting the elected officials to understand how important our Bay is. I think they all get it. They understand that our natural systems here really are our economy. That's why 3 million people live here, because it's such a wonderful place. It brought us here. We need to keep it as beautiful as it's been historically. As we as a society learn what works and what doesn't work, like 100 years ago when we you know, started dredging all over the place in Biscayne Bay and making land masses where they didn't exist before. After a while, we realized, well, that was a mistake. So we had regulations developed to stop that. We were cutting down our mangrove shorelines, which were part of our natural treatment system. We realized, wait a minute, that's a mistake. So laws were enacted to protect mangroves. Now, as we see the Bay shifting in its ecosystem because of what we've done on the landscape, we realize we need something new. So we need to look at our stormwater drainage systems, fertilizer ordinances, the integrity of our infrastructure to make sure that things get repaired, and that if we need to switch from septics to sewer, we do that. I think that Patrick made an incredibly important point. The concept of putting everything on sewers is an overwhelming thing. What we need to do is to identify which systems need to be fixed first so that we get the most bang for our buck, and we start to see the positive results in Biscayne Bay. So we need to look very closely at the data that would explain where do we need to install sewer systems sooner rather than later so that we end up eliminating septic systems that are impacting Biscayne Bay. For point of clarification, I want to point out, Albert had mentioned the Biscayne Bay Environmental Enhancement Trust Fund. I just want to clarify, it is not fed by millage. It is fed by people who do projects in Biscayne Bay that have an impact, and they pay a mitigation to offset that. If they don't repair the Bay themselves, they pay into the Biscayne Bay Environmental Enhancement Trust Fund. And over the last, you know, close to 40 years, Durham has used that and worked with partners like the South Florida Water Management District, DEP, and Florida Inland Navigational District. That name may not be familiar to many, but it's certainly familiar to Durham. We've received millions of dollars from FIND over the years to construct projects in Biscayne Bay. Somebody mentioned the spoil islands. We have done all kinds of environmental enhancement projects on the Biscayne Bay spoil islands, stabilizing the shorelines to keep them from eroding into the bay and causing turbidity, removing exotic vegetation, creating mangrove planters, and we do have some trash receptacles out there. We do need the public to understand that, you know, if the island was beautiful enough to go visit to begin with, leave it that way when you leave the island. Don't leave your trash behind. Pack in and pack out. We all are part of the picture. So it's really important that we continue to leverage the cooperation that we've gotten with some of the other state agencies. We have, through Durham, have an environmental restoration enhancement program, have created artificial reefs in Biscayne Bay. We have done shoreline stabilization projects, created mangrove planters. We've recreated coastal wetland habitat. I think we need to amp that up and continue to do more of the same. So
Director Hefty, if I may, we've got some questions from the gallery. We'll start off with Daniel. of the Ocean Conservancy, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Mario. So, Lee, I think this gets to one of the points that you highlighted. And let me start over by saying I'm Daniel Padilla Ochoa. I'm with Ocean Conservancy, based in Miami and grew up in Miami. And so the point that you were making of prioritizing and figuring out which of the projects that are going to get the most bang of the buck first, right? And
Yes.
so the environmental community agrees that Biscayne Bay needs our help and our all efforts to improve the water quality. However, like you mentioned, we're all working from different angles. So for example, some debate between prioritizing septic to sewer conversions or updating and maintaining failing sewer infrastructure. What would be your advice to the greater Biscayne Bay environmental groups? How can we best organize and also work together with you to make sure that we kind of get the best bang for the buck?
So what I would suggest, and I don't remember which speaker it was that sort of identified the problem as you know, we suffer from non-point source pollution. And when it gets aggregated into the canal systems are simply the vector that delivers water off the watershed into the bay. But there's multiple activities on the landscape that could be causing that pollution. It could be the septic systems, it could be faulty sewer infrastructure, it could be the way we use land use activities, whether it's fertilizer or blowing our vegetation in the streets, so all of those things. So what I would say is we shouldn't get distracted with one of them. We need to look at all of those potential sources, because until we figure out exactly which ones are contributing the largest amount of the nutrient pollution that we're seeing, we should advance the knowledge on all those fronts. And so I agree we need to be looking at septic systems. I think we need to be looking at sewer systems to make sure that where they are faulty, where they're leaking, where we have stormwater that is getting into these systems. Well, if stormwater can get in or groundwater can get in, it means the sewage can also get out and impact our groundwater. So I think we need to look at all of those. We need to look at fertilizers. So I would say I would keep the energy focused on all fronts. I wouldn't limit ourselves at this point until we start to identify the major contributors. And even within those categories, you want to make sure that you address the ones that are the most effective. So it's, you know, replacing a septic system out in Kendall is probably not as important as replacing one that is closer to the coast or closer to a canal that's delivering water to the bay.
Thank you so much, Director Hefty. The next question is from Kristen at the Little River Conservancy. And we ask that you keep your questions brief.
Hi, Commissioner. It's really nice to meet you. Thank you for taking these questions. We all agree that we're really at a pivotal moment for securing the long-term sustainability of the Bay and the surrounding watershed. But at the same time, there has been historically a big disconnect between plans at the state and county level and the ability to translate those plans into meaningful shovel on the ground action at the community level. There's just a big disconnect in communication and also resources. So for example, El Portal, which is at the drain end of the C7 Little River Basin, is one of the smallest municipalities in Miami-Dade, yet it is right now trying to mount a septic to sewer conversion project without any kind of watershed plan, which is a really heavy lift for a community of this size. And we have residents along the river from a pretty diverse range of socio and economic backgrounds who really care deeply about the river and would like to take action, but we have found it very difficult to connect these highly local efforts with the infrastructure and oversight that we need to make the action work on a local basis. So my question is just how can we galvanize the resources to translate these types of recommendations that we've heard here today, which are amazing, to meaningful financial and logistical support for engaged communities all along the river?
So I'm happy to speak up, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I would say based on the recommendations from the Biscayne Bay Task Force, it is recommended that a watershed management board be created. And you've already heard, and the county's approved the creation of a chief bay officer to sort of be the champion that will help drive some of these things to fruition. The development of a watershed restoration plan is what is really needed, because I think then it'll put it in much more concise terms so that all of the municipalities, the county, the state, and everybody that's participating in Biscayne Bay's restoration has a roadmap to getting to the solution that you're describing. If you do it all disjointed, then it's going to be, it's going to be difficult to be very effective. So I think it's important that through a watershed restoration plan, we identify projects and strategies to restore Biscayne Bay so that all of the municipalities, the county, and the state agencies can either pick from the projects that are specifically identified or identify projects that advance a strategy for addressing the nutrient pollution that we're seeing in Biscayne Bay. And I'll step back and let others speak up.
No worries. The next question comes briefly from Emilio at the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit Steering Committee.
Thank you for that. And Lee, thank you for putting yourself in the hot seat. I know that it's not easy taking these questions live. So here's our question from the steering committee. We know that the DEP impaired waters evaluation and status review does not occur until 2021. We don't want to wait that long. So to avoid further massive marine die-off and to help mitigate the current impaired condition of Biscayne Bay and the associated watershed, how can the county rapidly enact a watershed board, which the CBO can direct to advance a locally driven watershed restoration plan, which you mentioned? Thank you.
Thank you. So I will point out that at the commission meeting in late August, one of the commissioners, Commissioner Sosa, I believe it was Vice Chair Sosa, had actually proffered, and a resolution was passed asking for an implementation plan from the county. How do we get started? And I think what we are working on is a reply to the commissioner's request for a report, which would basically identify how you can create a watershed management board, which would be done by ordinance, minimally by ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners. So working through the county attorney's office under direction from the Board of County Commissioners, an ordinance could be created to go to the board to actually create it and then have the board members identified. At the same time, the county is already working on creation of the Chief Bay Officer. It was approved in the budget and funded. So now you just have to write the job descriptions and get it through, have the position advertised and hire someone. So those two things are the most important steps to getting a watershed restoration plan underway. Because
yeah, but Lee, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to give folks perspective here because we're leading into an election. So I expect more than likely our next mayor to be the one to appoint this Chief Bay Officer and enact all of this. So that's going to take a few months. So let's put things in perspective, folks. I think it's great that we're moving forward and that all these things will be in place so that day one, we can hit the ground running with whoever our next leader for the county will be. But let's not lose that momentum that we have and keep folks moving. The good thing is that our Biscayne Bay Task Force, which you were a member of, Lee, thank you so much for all of your support, pretty much sets the path forward. So there's a lot of things that we can be doing and that we are doing right now before this Chief Bay Officer gets placed. Kristen, I wanted to follow up on the question that you asked because that again, we can't be waiting for a few months for things to get going. Legislative session is coming right around the corner. So I think that, and I'm putting my chamber hat on, whatever the private, the private industry can do to partner with these smaller cities and smaller municipalities is going to be key. We can't expect government to solve all the problems and fund everything. I mean, it comes on our backs. So we have to get creative, and we built into our funding mechanism, our funding recommendations, mechanisms in which public-private partnerships can be established, community-based partnerships which is a new form of creative financing that we all should be exploring. So let's not just focus on only government funding because we're going to need private funding as well. With that, I'll leave it because I know we have a Jen Cleo question coming.
We've got a Jen Cleo question, and then we're going to move on to the subject of calls for action, and we may try and shoehorn another question in from Rachel herself. Lee, before all those questions, thank you for your service, because being a government official is a difficult job, and especially putting yourself in the hot seat. So we ask these questions with kindness and with the concern of the Bay in our hearts. So yeah, let's hear it from Jen Cleo, folks.
Hi there, my name is Gabriela Rodriguez, and I'm a Jen Cleo Youth Leader with the Cleo Institute, And here's my question. Does Durham plan to incorporate natural resilient solutions such as living shorelines to protect our coast from storm surges, sea level rise, and stormwater polluted runoff? Furthermore, does Durham plan to increase collaboration with local organizations to help educate our communities on the benefits of these nature-based solutions? Thanks.
Thank you. And so we've been doing that actually for the last 40 years. So if you look at, let's say, on Miami Beach, all the sand restoration on the beaches and the creation of the natural dune systems, that's a form of protection against climate change and sea level rise on the barrier islands. I had mentioned the Biscayne Bay Environmental Enhancement Program that we've been running now for 40 years, where in various parts around the county, we have stabilized the shoreline with riprap, we have created mangrove planters, we have restored the islands in Biscayne Bay, we have actually recreated coastal wetlands along the shoreline. And in terms of education and outreach, in many cases, we've recruited volunteers to come help us with doing plantings on those areas. So it's an effort that's been underway for a number of years. I think we need to do more of it. When you recreate wetlands along the shoreline, you give a place for the water to go before it gets into Biscayne Bay. You also protect what is built landward of those wetlands from the impact of storm surge because you build a natural shoreline. So up near Oleta River, we've built additional mangrove shorelines and replanted mangroves. Out on Virginia Key, we've done some work. Down near Chapman Field, in the middle part of the county, we've done similar kinds of work. There's many places along the bay where that kind of work has already happened. We need to continue to do more. And going forward, I would suggest that in areas that today are particularly vulnerable, that we know will be more vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise, those are places we should be looking at converting back to natural systems so that the people that are living upstream of there are more protected.
All right, and one final brief unscripted question from the commissioner of a small coastal island municipality. Rachel?
Hi.
There we go.
Sorry, I was just trying to start my mic. Thanks, Mario, and thanks everyone for this great information. Lee, I have a question specifically for you. Thank you for being here. I'm in North Bay Village. As you know, we are particularly vulnerable. We're right off the Little River Canal. And I'm wondering, I'm working on a resolution to actually ask the county to replant the mangroves along the Kennedy Causeway that may have been there before the hurricanes. And I'm asking, what is the potential for us to be able to do that? And will you commit to working with us so that we can replant those mangroves that were lost along the Kennedy Causeway?
Thank you. And I would say absolutely. When we're looking at some of these northern basins that have gone through some ecological shifts, the Julia Tuttle Basin or the 79th Street Basin near Broad Causeway, those are places where we need to think about trying to provide some additional natural systems because the seagrass systems are disrupted. And so whatever nutrients are finding their way out into those bay areas, there isn't any natural system to help metabolize those things. And so creating additional mangrove shoreline along those areas is critically important. The one thing I would suggest, because a lot of times you hear about living shorelines, and in some cases I've heard people say that Durham is against them. We're not against them. We've built them in many places. You just have to be careful where you choose to do it, because what you don't want to do is destroy Biscayne Bay seagrass habitat to replace it with mangrove habitat. What you'd like to do is to take an opportunity to recreate wetlands outside of the bay along the edge as much as possible. Now, in some cases, if you have areas where there isn't anything on the bottom and you can create mangroves on bay bottom where there are no resources, then we certainly would work to do that because we've done that kind of work over the years ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, folks. All right, Director Hefty, thank you so much for your time and service. I really appreciate it. Steve Sauls is now going to do the calls to action and requests for support. I am going to briefly see if I can introduce Mr. Sauls, who I don't think I've ever met before. Steve. Oh, Steve, of course. Steve actually kind of doesn't really need much of an introduction. He's been doing this work for about 42 years, everywhere from Washington, D.C. to Miami. So, Mr. Sauls, thanks so much, and take it away in terms of deliverables and calls to action.
Thank you, Mario, and thanks for helping us moderate this important panel today. And thank you to all the participants who are showing up and showing that you care and leaning in to get the latest on what we see is happening. There's a lot of wonderful people who have been doing a lot of excellent work in Biscayne Bay, and we should be celebrating that work. The problem is the Bay is dying. It hasn't been coordinated as fully as it might, and there are gaps in the effort and in the research. So what is wonderful here is that there is reason to hope, and there's reason to be optimistic. I want to thank you, Luis Rodriguez, for your vision of bringing everybody together in a summit format, and we've done that twice. And you've brought a lot of wonderful people together to address this issue. And I want to thank our Camilla Kresma-Sharp, who has been our technical backbone in producing this event today with some professional help. And without your help, we probably wouldn't be able to do this as well. I want to thank Arella, Tiffany, and Lee for your service on Biscayne Bay Task Force and for your ongoing commitment to the restoration of Biscayne Bay. It was a real privilege to serve with you. And I want to thank you, Todd and Rachel, for helping us make science-based decisions and through your leadership, better coordinating our scientific understanding of the ecology of Biscayne Bay. You know, one of the things I learned in graduate school in public policy is the first thing you do is define the problem. So the Biscayne Bay Task Force took a lot of time trying to get it right and trying to define the problem of what is actually happening in Biscayne Bay. We love little quick solutions, simple solutions, but it's complicated. But what is happening is we are seeing signs of collapse. And we are now turning to those solutions which the Biscayne Bay Task Force has developed and recommended, and we are looking forward to their being implemented. I want to thank you, Amelia, for your leadership on our Biscayne Bay Summit Steering Committee and for your work along with Scott on the real practical engineering solutions that are available now to help keep pollutants and trash from entering the Bay. Of course, it's going to depend on all of us to try to reduce our own trash streams to keep this Bay trash from getting even to the streets or to the Bay in the first place. I want to thank you, Albert, for taking the time from your successful businesses, I say businesses, and Lee from your important duties at Durham to help us understand the importance of funding and coordinated governance to help a watershed recovery plan unlock the opportunities for state and federal government support. You know, we're trying to build a house. There's a lot of things people can be doing to clear the land, to buy the lumber, to buy the bricks, but we have to have a plan to build a house so we can coordinate what the house looks like, design the right plan for the house, and build the house. I want to thank you, Dave, and volunteercleanup.org for sounding the alarm on Bay full of trash that is breaking down, entering our food chain. It's our trash. It's time we step up and reduce our consumption of single-use plastics and other waste that's entering the Bay in the first place. We don't need necessarily to wait for ordinances before looking to what we can do. It's going to be a joint effort, multiple areas of action, and we need to get on with the job of making cleaner living a habit and making our clean environment a habit where we're all trustees and we all share this responsibility. And I want to thank all of our community leaders, elected officials, scientists, media who are joining in and realize the vision of a healthy and sustainable Biscayne Bay so future generations can enjoy what we have today before it's too late. I got involved about 6 years ago, and I found a lot of good work being done, but the problem is not the lack of good work, although the problem is not enough of it, and it's not been fully coordinated. And so for the first time we've sounded, and it's not the first time we've sounded the alarm. The Bay has been steadily dying. But now we can all see the dead sea grass meadows in all parts of the bay, and we can see it in dead fish floating on the surface, and we can see it in the algae bloom in the Sans Souci canals. So now let's see what we can join together and take action to accomplish. Today is particularly timely because, as you've been told, it's been reported, Mayor Jimenez is going to present his plan to the County Commission this coming October 6th to implement the recommendations of the Biscayne Bay Task Force. You know, even if everybody says we are going to implement the recommendations, there's still a lot of work that's going to have to be done. We need to stay in tune, stay in touch, stay engaged. So what happens in politics, sometimes other priorities get raised, and the problems that we care about get kicked down the road. It's time for all of us, including the mayors, the city commissioners, and all of us through all the various jurisdictions, to step up our game and get going on this. We've done good work in the distant past in Miami-Dade County, but we've dropped the ball. And other communities like Tampa Bay have stuck with it. And they started in the 70s, they kept at the task, and they've seen actual results. So we know, as our scientists tell us, we can do this. So the commission has already declared a Biscayne Bay emergency. They've approved prioritizing and accelerating actions related to the health and well-being of Biscayne Bay, and they've authorized the chief Bay officer. That Bay officer is critical to have someone assigned to wake up in the morning to know and think about what can be done to ensure that we are on track with report cards from Durham, with outside participation from the community to get the job done. So let's just quickly review the overarching recommendations of the Biscayne Bay Task Force. One is primarily creation of a Biscayne Bay Water Management Board. It needs to have a central clearinghouse. When I got involved, and I'm used to doing this in my work over the years, you know, who's in charge? Who's doing what? There's a plethora, there's an abundance of alphabet soup organizations doing good work, but it's hard to get a grip on what the overall plan is and the overall strategy is. A chief Bay officer should help to support this work and be guided with the help of a community advisory committee, a technical committee, and a nutrient reduction committee. This is where many of you will come in, because many of you might be able to serve on one or more of these advisory committees. We also need a community-wide education outreach plan to get the public involved. Lots of things are being done. You know, we heard about a lot of good things over the course of the year when we received all these presentations. The problem is, it's not getting the total job done. The task force has made 16 recommendations that can be implemented in less than a year, and another 31 that can reasonably put together and implemented in 1 to 3 years. Others are going to take time, but we should not be discouraged by that. And we should not defer getting started and getting the ball rolling. The Biscayne Bay Task Force certainly had a sense of urgency, and they benefited from the 2 community summits in 2017 and 2019, from the grand jury report, from other reports that have sounded the alarm, from NOAA to other NGO organizations such as Waterkeepers. We now have a plan before you. We built our recommendations on the work of truly grassroots work of the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit volunteers, and we want to thank everyone involved. It would be a very long list to try to single out all the people who've helped make today happen to get us to this point. But recovery will not happen by magic. It will take a long and hard, persistent effort with the community engaged. Now, it won't happen if we sit back and think it's somebody else's problem, or simply our government officials need to get it done. They'll be listening to us, they'll be listening to you, and let them hear from you. Let them know that you care, that you're paying attention, and that a healthy bay matters. Don't be satisfied if they kick the can down the road. Don't be satisfied if they don't make it a big priority. You know, I like swimming in the ocean. Isn't it a shame that I need to go to Waterkeepers and surf riders which provide a very important function, but I have to check with them to find out if it's safe to go swimming. None of us should accept that. We really need to reach out to those PR professionals who are selling Greater Miami and the beaches as a world-class resort destination, a place to live and work, a place to vacation, and we need to get the best minds together to help communicate and engage the full public. The truth is, we've been treating Biscayne Bay as a garbage dump. I wake up every morning on the Biscayne Bay. I love to take photographs and post them of the sunrises. But the trouble is, it's surface beautiful. You just look at the canals which supply the fresh water needed to sustain life in the bay, and just look at the islands on the shorelines that are filled with marine debris. No matter how many heroic cleanups are held by volunteers, remember, it's not just about the environment that needs to be addressed here. It's about our economy and our community. If our bay collapses, our economy could collapse as well. So we all have a personal stake in the health of Biscayne Bay. And while it's long and complicated, and it'll take a while to get it done, we can do it. And as I've said, Tampa Bay did it, other estuarine communities have done it, we can do it. So today, I'd like you to consider 5 things. 5 things that I hope are posted up here. Call. You know, I was in the governmental relations advocacy business most of my professional life when I wasn't actually working on the inside. And I know that letters are important, calls are better, personal visits are even better yet, particularly if you know the decision makers or the elected officials. And a lot of these officials are campaigning for your vote. So don't neglect any opportunity you have to speak to them personally, to write them, or to call them and tell them that you support the recommendations of the Biscayne Bay Task Force. Tell them you support a new Biscayne Bay Watershed Board and a new fertilizer ordinance, because fertilizer use in the summer is one of the issues that surface quickly as something that could be done and could be addressed ASAP. And so when you do this, I would just remind you to be respectful, use your own words, thank them for their leadership and support. You know, a lot of folks are already trying to marshal their efforts, respond to the recommendations of the task force, and get it done. If you do not know who your commissioner is, it's very easy to go to the Miami-Dade Government Commission District's web page. They'll help you identify who your commissioner is by your district, and reach out to them. Send them a note. Please do it today. And reach out to 2 friends. We all have at least 2 friends, and ask them to do the same. Better yet, enlist the support of your organizations. Ask them to make this work a priority. Share what you're doing through social media, network. Join the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Summit. We're working very hard at producing a monthly newsletter with updated information on activities of many of the organizations represented on this call. So join this Facebook. It's a great source of information. You can get regular updates and give us your ideas on how to improve it and how to make it more effective. I'll encourage you to volunteer for one of the many organizations working for a clean and sustainable bay. Waterkeepers has given us some suggestions. MiamiCleanup.org has given us some others. There are many opportunities, so you can use your own time to get directly involved. And finally, just try to reduce your personal consumption of single-use plastic products. When I started this work, I was daunted by the task. I walked on the beach up above Boca, and I would find trash from all over the world. It is a global problem, but it's a global problem with a very specific local impact. So the first step in reducing the flow of trash from our streets to our waterways is stop adding to the trash which you bring into your home that needs to be disposed of. I'm confident we can do it if we work together. Our coordination is terribly important. Finally, give us some feedback. Let us know what you're doing. Work with us so that we can together by coordinating the science, coordinating our activities, rallying around a watershed board and a chief bay officer so they can help get it right, just like the Biscayne Bay Task Force tried to do with our recommendations. Let's go forward. Let's step up. Let's take it to the next level. And in that, I'll close and saying, we're in this for the long haul, and I look forward to working with you along the way. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. I really appreciate it. Those are some really trenchant suggestions. Folks, thanks so much for spending part of your Friday morning with us. I want to thank all the members of the task force who put this together. I especially think thanks is due to Camila Quaresma Sharp, who's been working diligently behind the scenes to put this together, and all of the other folks working behind the scenes. This could not have happened without them. I'll leave with one closing remark. The civic life of a city is reflected in its environment, right? So if you get engaged, if you fight to make sure that the natural spaces that have no voice in government have a voice in government, then the outcomes that you'll see are better for everyone in terms of equity, in terms of justice, but also in terms of enjoyment and economics. So thank you so much for participating here. And I don't think I could ethically let you go without asking you to subscribe to your local newspaper, be it the Miami Herald or the South Florida Sun Sentinel, or perhaps to both, and maybe throw in a subscription to the Palm Beach Post if you can afford it. And if you are interested in the subjects of sea level rise and climate change, I do have a book called Disposable City about the subject. So have a great day, folks. Thank you so much for everything.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, as well. This is a fantastic Zoom meeting. Really amazing. Thank you so much, Camille, and everyone else.